A man sits across from a woman at dinner. She says something designed to provoke. He feels the pull to correct her. He feels the need to defend his position. But he says nothing, and the silence stretches between them like a test. Strong men understand that argument is the language of investment. When you argue, you signal that her frame matters more than yours. You hand her the only currency that counts in any interaction. You give her your attention, and you provide it for free. The moment you engage her resistance, you have already lost the encounter. She texts you at midnight after 3 days of silence. The message is vague and laced with accusation. Your instinct is to clarify, explain, and fix. But the strong man sees the pattern beneath the provocation, and he does not reply. He knows that response windows are not about cruelty, but about maintaining the center of gravity in his own life. Jung called it the anima, the feminine principle that lives inside every man. When she tests you, she is not testing your logic. She is testing whether you can hold your throne when the storm arrives. Argument is the place where men abandon sovereignty and beg for approval through reason. But women do not process tension through syllogism. They process it through presence and through the shape of your attention. When you argue, you collapse that presence into defensiveness, and she feels it immediately. Consider the chess player who moves without thinking. He reacts to every feint and every diversion. His opponent does not need a better strategy. She only needs to keep him reacting until his position crumbles from within. The strong man knows that the board is won by those who control tempo, not by those who chase every piece. You see this in dating dynamics every single day. A woman cancels plans an hour before you are supposed to meet. The average man types a paragraph asking why. The strong man says nothing, or he says good, and he goes to the gym. He understands that her behavior is information, not an invitation to negotiate. Nietzsche wrote about the will to power, not as domination, but as the capacity to impose form on chaos. When you refuse to argue, you are not avoiding conflict. You are choosing the battlefield and the weapons. Argument is her terrain, and she has spent a lifetime learning to win there. The forge does not argue with the metal. It applies heat, pressure, and time. The metal either takes the shape or it breaks. A man who argues is a man who has forgotten that his presence is the furnace, not the hammer. She will test the temperature, and if it flickers, she will know the forge is cold. You walk into a room, and she criticizes your choice in front of others. The weak man defends himself and lists his reasons. The strong man smiles or says nothing, and the room feels the shift. Everyone knows who holds the frame, and everyone knows who just gave it away. Masculine sovereignty is not loud, but it is always visible. Think about the attention economy for a moment. Every argument is a transaction where you spend capital. The question is whether you are buying something of value or simply paying tribute. When she provokes and you engage, you are paying tribute. When she provokes and you walk away, you are enforcing the rules you live by. The shadow appears here as well. That part of you that fears being misunderstood or labeled. The part that believes silence equals weakness. But silence is only weak when it comes from fear. When it comes from choice, it becomes the most potent form of communication available to you. She says you never listen and you never care. The argument trap is obvious. If you defend yourself, you prove her point. If you apologize without cause, you lose respect. The strong man knows the only winning move is to refuse the frame entirely and let her words fall into space. Plato would recognize this as the battle between appetite and reason. Appetite demands immediate satisfaction through reaction. Reason understands that some battles are won by not showing up. When you argue, you feed the appetite and starve the reason. When you withdraw, you let reason govern, and appetite exhausts itself against nothing. Observe the mirror for what it reveals. A woman who constantly provokes is showing you her inner state. She is chaotic, and she needs you to match that chaos so she can feel normal. The moment you mirror her chaos, you become part of her problem. The moment you stay calm, you become the solution she does not want, but desperately needs. You are not her therapist, and you are not her father. You are the man who holds a standard. That standard is not negotiable and not up for debate. If she meets it, the door stays open. If she does not, the door closes, and you feel nothing but clarity. Modern dating has become a war of narratives. Whoever controls the story controls the relationship. When you argue, you let her write the script, and you accept a supporting role. When you refuse to argue, you write your own script, and she either auditions or exits. Strong men understand that casting is more important than convincing. The storm does not ask permission to rage. It simply moves, and the landscape either bends or breaks. A man who argues is a man who believes he needs permission to exist in his own shape. A man who walks away is a man who knows the storm will pass and the landscape will reveal what remains. This is individuation in its rawest form, stripped of all the academic language and placed directly into the field of human relating. She will call this avoidance or emotional unavailability. She will frame your silence as a character flaw. Let her frame it however she needs. Your job is not to correct her perception. Your job is to live according to your own internal compass and let the results speak for themselves. Think about leverage in any negotiation. The person who needs the outcome less holds all the power. When you argue, you reveal that you need her to see you a certain way. When you disengage, you reveal that her opinion is not the axis around which your world turns. She feels this shift at a level deeper than language, and it changes everything. Kierkegaard spoke about the leap of faith. The moment when you stop trying to rationalize and you simply commit. Refusing to argue is a breach of masculine boundaries. You stop trying to make her understand, and you start living as though your reality is self-evident. Either she joins that reality or she does not, but the fact itself remains untouched by her resistance. You meet a woman who seems perfect on paper. 3 weeks in, she starts testing. Small comments about your job, your friends, or your ambition. The weak man explains, justifies, and tries to win her approval. The strong man hears the test and begins the selection process, not persuasion. Selection is the most misunderstood concept in masculine strategy. Men think they have to earn a woman's approval. They have it backwards. She has to earn your time, attention, and commitment. An argument inverts this hierarchy, putting you in the applicant's position, begging for the role. The throne is not a metaphor for arrogance. It is a metaphor for centeredness. A man on his throne does not need to prove he belongs there. His presence on the throne is proof enough. When you argue, you step down from the throne, and you ask her to validate your right to sit there. She says you are not emotionally available. She says you are closed off. These are comfort tests disguised as accusations. She wants to see if you will abandon your frame to soothe her anxiety. The strong man knows that her anxiety is not his responsibility, and he lets her sit with it until she decides whether she can handle a man who does not need her validation to feel whole. Consider the businessman who negotiates a deal. He states his terms once. If the other party counters with unreasonable demands, he does not argue. He simply says the deal is off the table, then walks away. This is not cruel to your ego, but the recognition that bad deals are worse than no deals at all. You are building a life, not managing a crisis. Every argument is a crisis management session where you sacrifice long-term respect for short-term peace. The strong man knows that short-term peace built on capitulation leads to long-term resentment. He would rather face the discomfort now than live in a relationship where he is constantly negotiating his right to be himself. The shadow work here is brutal and unavoidable. You have to confront the part of you that fears being alone. You have to confront the part of you that believes you are not enough without her approval. When you refuse to argue, these fears rise to the surface and demand attention. This is where most men break and return to the argument because the internal discomfort feels worse than the external conflict. But the men who push through this discomfort discover something remarkable. They discover that they do not need the argument. They discover that her assessment does not determine their value. They discover that walking away is not loss but liberation. And once they discover this, they become almost impossible to manipulate through provocation. She will escalate before she submits. This is the pattern you must understand. When you stop arguing, she will increase the intensity of her provocation. She will accuse you of not caring, not trying, and not being a real partner. This is the extinction burst, and if you hold the frame through it, the dynamic shifts permanently. Machiavelli understood that power is perception. The moment you argue, you concede that her perception has the power to destabilize you. The moment you refuse, you demonstrate that your internal state is governed by principles, not by her emotional weather. She can rage, and she can withdraw, and she can threaten, and none of it moves you because you are anchored to something more profound than her approval. Think about the man who chases a woman after she walks away. He texts, he calls, and he explains. He believes that more communication will fix the problem. What he is doing is proving that her absence has more power than his presence. The strong man lets her walk, and if she comes back to a man who did not crumble in her absence. You are not punishing her by refusing to argue. You are protecting the relationship from the slow death of resentment. Every time you argue and lose frame, you deposit resentment into the foundation. Over months and years, that resentment becomes the structure and the relationship collapses under its weight. The strong man builds on respect, not on negotiated truces that both parties secretly despise. Women are testing for congruence. They want to know if the man they see is the man you actually are. Argument is the fastest way to reveal incongruence. If you claim to be confident but argue to defend it, she knows it is a mask. If you claim to be secure but argue to prove it, she knows it is a performance. The gravity of a man is felt, not explained. When you walk into a room, people feel it. When you leave a room, people feel it. Argument is the attempt to create gravity through words, and it never works. Gravity is the result of mass, and mass is built through consistency and action, and the refusal to be moved by every passing storm. She needs to feel your boundaries before she can trust them. This is the paradox that destroys most relationships. Men think they show care by being accommodating and flexible, but accommodation without boundaries is just formless anxiety. She cannot relax into you if there is no structure to relax into. You set a boundary and she pushes against it. The weak man renegotiates the boundary to keep the peace. The strong man enforces the boundary and lets her feel the consequence. The consequence is not anger or punishment, but simply the natural result of crossing a line. And once she repeatedly feels the consequence, she stops pushing because she knows the boundary is real. This is not about control. This is about clarity. She wants to know where the edges are. When you argue, you blur the edges and you make her do all the work of figuring out what is real and what is negotiable. When you refuse to argue, you draw the edges in bold, and she can finally stop testing and start trusting. The men who argue the most are the men who trust themselves the least. They believe that if they do not defend their position, it will crumble. But positions built on words crumble anyway. Positions built on action and consistency and the willingness to walk away survive everything. And the women who stay are the women who value that survival over the temporary comfort of winning an argument. You will lose women by refusing to argue. This is guaranteed. Some women need the chaos, and they will leave when you stop providing it. Let them leave. They were never going to build anything stable with you anyway. The women who stay are the ones who recognize what you are offering. You are offering a frame for them to rest inside. You are offering leadership that does not bend to every emotional gust. You are offering the rare gift of a man who knows his value and does not need her validation to confirm it. These are the women worth building with, and they only appear after you stop arguing with the ones who are not. Masculine sovereignty is the ability to stand alone without collapsing. It is the ability to be misunderstood without explaining. It is the ability to be criticized without defending. When you argue, you trade sovereignty for approval, and the trade is always a loss. When you walk away, you keep sovereignty and filter for the women who value it. The forge image returns here. You are not cold when you refuse to argue. You are concentrated heat applied with precision. The metal that cannot handle the heat was never going to become the blade. And you are not in the business of lowering the temperature to accommodate inferior material. She will tell her friends you are distant. She will tell them you do not communicate. Let her tell them whatever she needs to. Your reputation with her friends is not your concern. Your concern is whether you are living in alignment with your own principles and whether the relationship serves your growth or stalls it. Years from now, she will understand or she will not. Either way, you will have built a life on a foundation of respect rather than on the shifting sands of constant negotiation. The men who argue create relationships that feel like work. The men who refuse create relationships that feel like flow because the frame is clear and the roles are defined and everyone knows where they stand. This is the final insight. Argument is the absence of leadership dressed up as communication. Authentic leadership does not argue. It decides, it moves, and it lets the results speak for themselves. If she cannot follow that leadership, she is free to find a man who will negotiate his every decision with her. But that man will never be free, and she will never respect him, and the relationship will die slowly in a fog of unspoken resentment. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to build a life that reflects your deepest values. Some women will see that life and want to join it. Most will not. Your job is to hold the standard and let the selection process run its course without interference. The strong man knows that his silence is not absence. It is present in its most potent form. It is the refusal to dilute his attention on battles that do not matter. It is the understanding that some conflicts are resolved not by winning, but by refusing to participate. And in that refusal, he discovers a freedom that argument could never provide. Walk away when the argument begins. Enforce the boundary without explanation. Let her feel the weight of your absence. She will either rise to meet your standard, or she will exit your life. Both outcomes are victories because both preserve your sovereignty.